Hey guys, good afternoon. What's going on? How are you? How sparkling and spectacular you all look. It's lovely to see you. All righty. So here's what I want to do. I want to just kind of tell you where I'm going to start, and then you can tell me where we're going to finish. Um, we have like 6 brave people who actually got up and washed their hair and got dressed today. Is everyone else still in their pajamas or just avoiding cameras? Are you afraid the law might be on this Zoom call? There we go. We at least guilted Jody into turning her camera on, and Silva. That's spectacular. All right. See, oh, look at that. Oh, my friends. Hello. So let's dive in. What I wanted to start with was after the discussions we had um, a week or 10 days ago or so about the numbers that seem to be driving the market for buyers right now. I had a couple of people that weekend text me and say, "Okay, I'm about to go sit down with buyers, and I'm struggling showing them numbers that you talked about. I'm struggling showing them like hard data from the MLS that proves that they should be at minimally 10, 15, 20% over the asking price." Hold on one second for me. So, so my answer to that weekend was, well, that's because it doesn't exist. So the first thing I want to be clear about is if you're looking on the MLS for something that says, here's the proof that you should be, that the averages across the board say 120%, that proof does not exist, right? The conversation that we had was that the trending on the MLS in terms of averages and spikes were increasing. I'm going to show you where to find that today so that you know what buttons to push and kind of where to show people where that is. The rest of that data we collected from internal conversations, right? That was that email that I sent out that said, listing agents, we need your help. And so the rest of that compilation of data occurred because your colleagues got back to me and said, here's what we're seeing in the last couple of weeks. That's not anything we can prove or show on the MLS today. It will close in the next month or so. And so as they start to close, then you have different examples. But understand that what we did is we took trending data from the MLS that showed averages and spikes on the incline and combined it with data that you all gave to me to say, here's what we're seeing right now. So when you combine the increase in trending with what we're seeing right now, that led us to winning today is minimally 10% over the asking price. Does that mean every single house will go at minimally 10% over the asking price? No, of course not. Right. And so remember that nothing works 100% of the time. You can't take this stuff so literally, right? And your clients can't take it so literally. There's a leap of faith in some of this. And I get that there are some of you who are real hard data people on the call. Look, I'm a hard data guy as well, except when the hard data doesn't really exist. And then we do the absolute best that we can with the data that we have, combined with the information that we can squeak together and piece together from each other to try and bring us up to current. If we're always waiting, this is the conversation I want you to have with your buyers. If we're always waiting for proof in the MLS, you're always looking in the rearview mirror. And in an increasing market, in an appreciating market, you're always going to be behind the 8 ball. You're making offers now. Your buyers are making offers now with information that was valid 30 days ago or 45 days ago. They're not making decisions about information that is today. So that's why we look at trending and then do the best that we can with information that we share with each other about what we're seeing on the listing side. Does that make sense to everybody as to kind of what the foundation for what we're talking about? So I'll say it one last time. If you're looking for concrete hard evidence that 20% is the number for your buyers to win, that hard evidence doesn't yet exist. So stop looking for it. I'll show you. I'm gonna jump now to my other screen and show you somewhere. All right, so while I log in, because I got booted out while I was talking, over and above that data, the trending data that I talked about, what else do you want to focus on today? How else can I help you in terms of knowing and pulling numbers from the MLS or Brokermetrics if you so choose? What else can I show you today that would be helpful? And then I'm going to jump into the trending data. Nothing. Everyone's all fed up with like, that's plenty of numbers. Thank you very much. For one day, that's plenty of numbers, Rick. Move on from it. Okay, I got it. If you think of something, hold on, there's stuff going on in the chat, which I'm not looking at. Let me see. I would like to know how to use Brokermetrics. Okay, scripts to use with the numbers. Okay, all right. So let me I'll see if we can circle back at the end and jump onto Brokermetrics if there's time, and we'll talk about scripts with the numbers as well. All righty, let's get you on the same screen as me here. Here we are, and here we are. Okay, who do I see on my screen? Hey, Josh, can you see the MLS on your screen now? Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so the I'm gonna do kind of a repeat of what I did the other day to come up with the conversation that we had at that in that session the other day, and what that looks like is this. That was a week and a half ago, right? So we were literally in the middle of March. So I'm gonna go and use the 75-day period of time all over again, just to kind of duplicate what I did. And so in the middle of March, a week and a half ago, I went and said, all right, we've had about 75 days since the first of the year. So let's use that as the first thing that we're going to look at. And here's what I did. Most of you know that I like to use the cross-property search because it kind of gives me access to everything. And what I said was, the way I typically do this is, instead of clicking all the property types, I just change it to not rentals or rentals. So that way I get everything else. In this scenario, we might want to take out the commercial stuff as well. Right? Did you know you could do that? You could either click all the ones or just say not one of them, and then you don't have to click all of them. So what this is kind of all the residential pieces of real estate. And let's just call it, we'll have to see if we can do the county as a whole to see how many closings we've had so far. Let's just see what that looks like. Okay, good. So we're still in good shape. So let's just do this as a county, just for grins and giggles. And so what I did here was I took out the residential rental and the commercial stuff so that we were left only with residential property types. I've clicked Fairfield County to give us that overview. And I've looked at everything closed from the first of the year through the middle of March, because that's what we did the last time. Right, so that was a 75-day period that I looked at. Now, once you get those closings, you got to click down here on results, and then you have to click here on stats at the bottom, and then click on tabular. So that's results, stats, tabular, which brings you to what I call the box, right? And so here you have this crazy box. All right, and so this is going to work a little bit less because we have some goofy numbers in here. So Let me just go back and take it off of Fairfield County and just do it town by town. Somebody pick a town. Let's all right, I'm sitting in Ridgefield, so I'll do Ridgefield for now, and then we can do some others. So you've got 62 sales, again, results, stats, and tabular, which brings you here to this box. And the places I want you to pay attention to are here and here, max and average, right? So if you are looking at max and average in terms of, list to sale ratio, which is this last column here, right? The average list to sale ratio in the last 75 days was 102%, right? With a spike of 134%, which is still a ridiculous number, and yet it kind of is what it is. That then gets compared to the previous 75-day period, right? Maybe if I were doing it today, I'd look back 60 days from today. So I'd look February 1 through today, and then I'd look at December, January to kind of see where things were trending. Maybe I want 3 data points. And so if I did it 60 days at a time, I'd go back 60 days, then I'd go 61 to 120, and then 121 to 180. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about in a second. So the 2 data points that you want to check out here are an average of 102% list to sale ratio for the last 75 days, and a spike of as high as 134%, right? And so then you go back to your criteria page and you simply change the dates. So if you're looking at this 75-day period, and you want to compare it to the previous 75-day period, 75 days from the tail end of the year ends up being, you have all of November and all of December, that's 60 days, and then half of October, right? So you've got 10/15/21 through 12/31/21. That's the previous 75-day period, right? You hit results, you hit stats, you hit tabular. Now, I haven't done this beforehand, so we'll see what it actually says. See how cooperative? The average was 100% for the previous 75-day period, with a spike as high as 126%. So what that simply tells me, just those 2 data points, is if you're plotting them on a graph, the more recent sales had a higher average sale price than the sales in the previous 75-day period, and a higher spike in terms of the max. Now, if you really wanted to go crazy, we could actually go back and see what the previous 75-day period was. Like I said, I haven't pre-tested this, so I don't know if the numbers will pan out. However, let's check it out. Why not, right? You only live once, let's live dangerously. So what's the 75-day period prior to October the 15th? Well, you go back September 15th, October 15th, September 15th, August 15th, August 1st. So now you're going to change your criteria period to 8/1/21 to 10/15/21. Click results and stats and tabular. And so here we have 100%, right? So the average didn't change all that much. However, look at the spike, right? The spike in the previous 75-day period was even lower. And so you're starting to see the trend throughout the fall into the winter, into where we are today, of an ever increasing average list to sale ratio with higher and higher and higher spikes above asking price. All right, I'm going to stop the share a second and just ask, does everyone understand what I just did? And do you have any questions around it? Debbie.
Got it. I didn't know how you were getting tabular, but now I do.
Got it. Perfect. Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns? Right. So really what you're looking at is trending. And remember, trending is not always a precise science. It's using numbers to predict where things might go. And that's kind of exactly what we're doing. If you're on a graph, you're plotting the points here, here, and here in terms of the spikes. And I mean, frankly, if you use the numbers in Ridgefield, 20% over asking price seems like a bargain, right? Because we were doing that back in September and October of last fall. Now the trending data says, you know, maybe you need to be 30% over. I don't know. So I'm going to do it one more time, because so I'm just going to pick another city. Let's switch it over to Stanford and see what that looks like. So I can do it again and just kind of show you what I did, and then we'll move forward. If you have any questions, just don't hesitate to ask. But I want to kind of start from the scratch so you can see where I'm getting all this. So again, we started with property type, and we did just all the residential pieces. Now remember, I'm in the not, so what is pulling is single family, condo, multi, and land, because I'm not residential rentals or anything commercial. We'll change the town now to the city of Stamford. We'll go.
Rick,
Yes,
may I ask you a question?
yes, of course.
What would be the difference between not and ticking those off and just ticking the other ones? What advantage is there to just ticking the ones that are unticked and leaving the not alone?
Because when I first clicked on not, I was just taking out residential rental, and then I remembered I needed to take out commercial as well. So in this scenario, it was either click on 4 or click on 4, so there wasn't any real
Okay.
advantage.
Thank you. I know it's just a small question. Thank you.
Yeah. So, sometimes for me, it's a matter of I want everything but rentals, and so I'll do not residential rental or commercial lease, and that gives me all the sales, commercial or residential, all lumped into one. So it's an easy way to just kind of pull out the rentals.
Okay.
And
thank
in
you.
my town, it's easier to just do the single families and then just do the co-ops and condos, because there's a big difference.
Exactly, right. So depending on where you're at, you're going to kind of use the buttons a little bit differently. So you're going to choose the property types. We've now chosen the city of Stamford. We're going to change this. And because we're going to use this a little bit later, I'm just going to do cut. So I'll pop it in a little bit later. And let's start where we started with the Ridgefield one. And that was 1/1/2022 to 3/15/2022. Right? So we're going to pull the same data for the city of Stamford. And that's all you need to get the box. You need a time period of closings. You need what property types you're asking for, and the geographic territory. So once you have that, you're going to click results and stats and tabular, right? Results, stats at the bottom, and then you have a choice, and you want to go with tabular, and that brings you here to the box. So in Stamford, we have 100% list to sale ratio as the most current, with spikes of up to 124%. See where I'm getting that, right? I'll show you again here. It's the max column and the average column. So the average list to sale ratio, that's SP to LP, that's sale price to list price. So the average list to sale ratio is 100%, and the max, so the spike in that time period, was up to 124% of asking price. So that's 24% over the asking price. Yes, Marion.
Do you find there's a bigger range, minimum to max, in some towns compared to others? So for example, Stanford, which is city, might have the conditions of a property more variable, and also the range would reflect that.
Yeah, I find that town by town, absolutely. And even within a town, price point by price point, which is why when you're doing this work, depending on what information you're looking to communicate, you're going to get really specific, or you're going to go a little bit broader, right? For the purposes of trying to figure out where the market's headed, broader is a little bit better, because you just have more data to work with.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And so then we're going to compare it again to the previous 75-day period, which we said was 10/15/21 through the end of the year. So we pop that on in there, and then we hit results and stats and tabular. And the results there are 99% list to sale ratio with spikes as high as 116%, right? If you see, that's right here. So far, the trending is the numbers are different than the town of Ridgefield to the city of Stamford. However, the trending is so far identical in that the last 75 days had a higher list to sale ratio with higher spikes than the previous 75-day period.
Hey, Rick, it's Randy. Do you mind just quickly and I know we're looking at the ratios over here and not trying to focus too much on the stuff in the middle, but I'm just curious if things are at 116% or 16% over, what would the 5.5 and 4.85 mean? Like, I know a client's going to ask me that. So why is the list above the close?
So great question. Remember that this number of 116 does not necessarily correspond to anything else in this line, because the max line is of the 434 properties that the system is looking at. The max had rooms at 15, had bedrooms at 16, cost a list price of 5.5, closed at 4.84, but not necessarily all the same property.
I gotcha. So it's an average. The average maximum sale price is 4.85. The average list price max is 5.5. It just doesn't have to do with each other.
No, it's not. So it's not an average. So let me, so of the 434 properties that sold in this time period, the highest list price of all 434 was $5.5 million. The highest list to sale ratio was 116%. However, that 116% doesn't necessarily correlate to the $5.5 million sale price.
I gotcha.
The highest days on market was 608 days on market, but that could be a third property. So how many columns are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. In this max category, there are 12 different columns. These numbers could relate to 12 different houses.
Gotcha.
They could relate to the same house if everything was the max. Do you see my point?
Yeah. So the list price of 5.5 could essentially have been the 4.8 close price, but
not necessarily.
Could be, but it's said to be 116% of sale price to list price. But that one specifically might not.
So the other day, one of the things that I did was, because if you do, let's see, do the math, it's 485. That one might be what's 485 divided by 550? 485 divided by 550 is, it's about oh, so it didn't even close over. It's 12% below ask price, right? So clearly this 116% spike was not on that $5.5 million house, right? And so if you wanted to figure out which one was the 116, you have to go back to the single list, the list of all the properties, and kind of run through the math and see. If you really want to figure that out and you have 434 properties, it's kind of a pain in the ass to do. I did it the other day. I was looking at just 10 or 12 properties, and I could quickly kind of scan through and say, all right, it's going to be one of these 3 or 4 that represent the spikes, to see if the properties that were spiking correlated to any of the properties that I was looking to figure out where they might close on, right? And none of them did. So when the numbers don't work, then for me, I just move on from it, right? That's not a conversation I'm going to have, because the ones that spiked aren't really as relevant as I wanted them to be. And yet it's still a data point that we talk about in terms of trending. Are we going up or are we going down? And then let's do one more, just again, for grins and giggles. And I know there are some questions in the chat, and I'll get to them in just a second. So we'll do that third 75 days just to see what it looked like. And so again, results, stats, and tabular after you change the date. And so in this case, in Stamford, right, so I'm glad this happened. In Stamford, the previous 75-day period, which was the end of the summer into the early fall, had 100% list to sale and 119% as the spike. So things went down in the fall a little bit, only to come back up in the winter and early spring. So if I were having conversation, but what we know right now, based on the information your colleagues gave us, is that the last 2 or 3 weeks, the spikes are crazy high, and the average list to sale even higher than the 100%. So that to me does not change my conversation. And if I were talking to buyers, then this data point of what happened last summer is kind of irrelevant and confusing. So I would drop it and use the 2 data points of 99 to 100. And now we're seeing, based on information internally, that we're really more at like 102 or 103% on average. And the spikes, 116 to 124, with spikes right now as high as the 130s. You see what you see how I'm kind of using the data to help explain what the market is showing them, instead of, and this is a mistake that I'm going to stop my screen share a second. This is a mistake that some of you make a lot. You try to have the data that shows up be explained to a T, to the minute. And if it doesn't work, you either don't use it or don't think it's relevant. And that is a huge, huge mistake. You've got to get better and better at looking at what the data says and creating a conversation around it, right? For example, if I'm sitting down with Gabby in 20 minutes and I'm looking at this data from the Ridgefield marketplace, my conversation with her, with my fun little chart that we built for you last week, is going to be, so Gabby, as we move forward and start your home search, just some data points about the market. So I took a look at the last 75 days and the 75 days before that and the 75 days before that, and combined it with current data that is not yet available in the MLS based on the size of our brokerage that we get to bring to you, because we do internal polling around what's happening in the market. And here are the data points. The average sale price, the average list to sale price in the town that you're looking to purchase a home in, has climbed from 100 to 102, and now we're seeing even higher than 102% on average, closer to the 104, 105 mark, with properties that have not yet closed that we have details on, with spikes that used to be 15% over the asking price that are now as high as 34% over the asking price. Just to give you an idea of the arena that you're headed into. You see that conversation? And now nobody should freak out when a $600,000 property comes on the market and they pay they offer 700 and they still lose. Like, no one should be surprised, because the numbers, the spikes are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we had that conversation. Okay, where are we going? Let's go ahead, Lloydie first.
Yes, I've been using the medium values in my is it called equity analysis video. I just want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. So unlike the minimum values, maximum values, and average values, the median value actually, those values actually represent one listing, right? The one in the middle, I hope.
Correct. Median is just one. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Randy, did I answer your question that you put in the chat about how to get the numbers?
Yes, but I do have another question. I was just trying to figure out how to raise my hand. I don't know, but I don't want to cut anyone though.
You just go like this. Go ahead.
From a seller, so from a listing agent standpoint.
You asked my question, great.
Switching gears. I have a client, for example, where we're trying to figure out that, the first time on, we had a buyer's remorse situation. So we're going back on and, all the offers that came in were, 20% over, or whatever, the 675 to the 700, well, that kind of sort of thing. They're taking, the standard of, you're getting that percentage over, but they're expecting it, and we don't want them to expect it. So is there a conversation around this sort of pull here, in a price range, for example, like 6 to 750 or something that we should be using this for, or is that just opening up a wrong can of worms?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And my answer to that is it depends, right? If I were in the field today, on the buy side or the list side, I would be looking at this town by town by town, city by city by city, and kind of charting this out. But I'd also, if I had buyers in a certain price range or I had sellers in a certain price range, I would be looking at what the numbers are in that tighter price range, either $100,000 or $200,000 price range, depending on the city and the town and the value of the homes, right? And the reason I would look at that is to see if things are even crazier in that price point, or are they a little more subdued in that price point, right? That's an important piece of information. And so when you combine the two to say that the city is going nuts, however, you need to be a little cautious because in this particular price point, we haven't seen spikes quite as high. The consistent average hasn't climbed quite as much, or it hasn't climbed at all. It stayed kind of from the previous 75 days to the last 75 days, we've seen the averages stay kind of the same in this price point. So whereas all your friends at the club may say, woohoo, everything's awesome, in your particular price bracket, we're seeing just a little bit of softness. So we need to just take a breath a little bit, right? So Randy makes a great point in that I think you need to do both to be able to have the best conversation. Now, part of the reason I say it depends on whether you bring the numbers out or not, depends on what the numbers say. Now whenever people hear me say that, I think they interpret it as don't give the clients the best information or lie to the people. That is so not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is sometimes we trip ourselves up by bringing data to the table that doesn't prove any kind of a point. And then the client's just confused because it doesn't really mean anything. Remember, they're counting on you to draw conclusions or help them draw conclusions from the numbers. If you can't really draw conclusions from the numbers, well, then just say that I did some math, and right now things are kind of all over the place. There's not a whole lot of conclusions we can draw from it. So best guessing is where we're going to stand with our offer or with our list price. Just tell the truth about that. Instead of bringing numbers to the table where you're struggling to try and connect the dots, and then they're looking at you and at the numbers, like, what does all this mean? Like, why are we even having this conversation? Does that help, Randy?
Yeah, it does, because we've had 2 buyer's remorse ones, and they were like obviously the outliers, and it went bad. So that will help. Like, don't always choose that outlier, because when they start getting in the house a little more, that buyer's remorse kind of goes, should I be doing this so high? So yes, it does. It helps in choosing an offer too. Yeah.
And let's spend a minute. I'm getting there, Ronnie. Let's spend a minute on buyer's remorse, right? Because to me, buyer's remorse signals one thing. And if you see it one time over the course of a number of months, either on the list side or the buy side, right, depending on who you represent, if you see it one time, okay, well then it happens every once in a while. You just kind of move through it. If you're representing buyers who wake up and decide, you know what, we can't do this. We're way uncomfortable now, and they're having buyer's remorse over and over again, or you have multiple buyers who keep waking up after winning the day and then saying no, or if you're on the list side like Randy is, and you're seeing the same property come back on the market because of buyer's remorse, that sends a really clear message that the peak of the market is probably here. Because the buyers who drive everything are starting not to want to have to throw everything they have, plus their last child, at the house to win, right? So, and how do you have those conversations, right? So we're seeing, so Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we're seeing some buyer's remorse. You saw it the last 2 times. What that means is recognize where the averages are, recognize where the spikes are, and recognize that the spikes so far have not been a benefit to you. Instead, what I want you to look at is when we go back on the market, or when we go back to this group of buyers, who looks like the strongest buyer, who may not be throwing you the most money, but who will wake up tomorrow with the strength that they came in with and carry that strength to an actual closing table. You have to help the sellers start to see past some of the dollar signs to the terms and the strength of a buyer. Who's representing that buyer, right? Is it some Joe Schmo that you don't know, right? Or is it Josh Caldwell, who you know is gonna drive that property to a closing, right? Who is it? And start having more conversations around just the crazy numbers. Ronnie, what question do you have?
No, I think Randy kind of hit upon it. So I was just saying, from a numbers standpoint, looking at it, being somebody who's listing a property, if you see, that the sales to list ratio is, let's say 20% over all the time, where do you list the person's property? But it sounds like what you're saying is you kind of look at the price range to see what's happening. At the price range, you may be wanting to list it and kind of see where it's happening. I guess at what point do you obviously want this auction effect and you want competition, but at what point, when all the properties are going over asking, at what point when you list a house, do you actually make it a little higher than you normally would have?
So you're still pricing and positioning. So you're still pricing based on comps.
Okay.
Because because the property still has to have some root in reality, right? Some foundation in reality. So you're still pricing based on comps. You want the comps to be as close to, in terms of closing date, close to the current date as possible. So you may choose different comps because of date. Something 6 months ago is kind of irrelevant at this point. And
Right.
then the positioning, right? Remember, pricing and positioning are 2 different things. So the pricing is going to happen based on sold comps, as tight to the current date as possible. The seller then may make a decision about positioning. It's up to you to control that decision about positioning. Can we push it a little bit because of what's happening? Sure. I mean, like, there's nobody who can legitimately look a seller in the face right now and say, you can't push it a smidge.
Okay.
But pushing it a smidge and pushing it more than a smidge are 2 different things. Because the second, I was just having a conversation with someone this morning who was telling me about a property that 100 days later, still not sold. I'm like, okay, well, there's only one reason for that. Well, but the market is so hot. Yeah, I get it, which is exactly the data point that you need to understand, that the market is so hot that 100 days later, you're old news. Properties that came on with you are already closed. The new people are decorating their bedroom and their family room, right?
Mhm.
So you missed everything. You've got to do a reset, because there is a point where where the competition starts to drop off. And so staying in that pocket of what the market set, where it says where you should be, let the buyers create the overage. Don't let the sellers create their own overage, because when they do it, the buyers won't, it's not 20% over any price. Remember, it's 20% over the market price. It's 20% over what the market is telling us right now. Just because you decide to list it $50,000 higher, it's not 20% over that.
Right.
Right? You see the point?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, what else is going on in the chat? Anything? Okay, good. Okay, any other questions on this conversation? Anything that you want to make sure that we cover? Do you understand the use of trending data? Do you see the benefit of understanding and if it were me, I would, for the towns that you work in, I would track this so you didn't have to keep doing it over and over and over again. Like, do it one time so you know what the 75-day period in the fall into winter was. You know what the next 75-day period is, so that as you keep going, you have data points that you can use along the way, so you don't have to keep doing the same math over and over again.
Rick, I might have missed this in at one point in the beginning, but is there a reason why you're picking a 75-day data? It's just what works. Okay.
The first time that I was preparing for the conversation that we had a week and a half ago or so about win the freaking deal, it just happened to be the middle of March. And so that was 75 days into the new year, which seemed like, let's just use the first of the year as a, so there's no right or wrong answer to that, Randy. You can use today and go back 60 days and then compare it to the last 60 days. I think less than 60 days is a little tough because there's oftentimes not enough data to really start pointing you in a direction. So I wouldn't use anything less than a 60-day comparison. 75 just happened to fit right. So you can use whatever makes sense. However, if you're pulling it for this coming weekend, remember you're going, 2 weeks has gone since the data that I just pulled for you. So 2 weeks in a market like this is an eternity. You still need to know what's current. You need to know where things are going. I intend on Friday to ask again the same question of all of you and your colleagues for over the weekend. Tell me about your last 2 or 3 listings. Give us more data so we can continue to update right to the minute. Maybe things are starting to come down. Maybe they're still high. So we'll get you as much information as we possibly can to share with your clients. Go ahead, Tammy.
So I'm always fascinated with this stuff. I love numbers and I love data. And my question is, how can I use this information to help our buyers and to help even listings? Like, how, as the lender, as a lending partner, as someone who my whole life is just solely based on helping you guys sell more real estate, what are do you have an idea even that I could use this as a lender to help my buyers and sellers?
Are you
And
asking
the
that
answer
question?
could be no, like anybody.
Well, so my answer to that is the fact that you're here and listening to the conversation and knowing the numbers, that just helps all of us reinforce with the buyers exactly what it is what we're talking about, right? You said either this morning or last week, I can't remember where you said it, but you said something to the effect of, yeah, when I'm talking to your buyers and they're talking to me about writing an offer for list price, like my answer is, okay, like why? What are you doing? Why are you bothering to waste the ink? Right now clearly on the lender side, you need to be having conversations one-on-one with each of the buyer's agents that represent those borrowers/buyers to make sure that you're all on the same page, right? Because if Noelle's not having the same conversation as you're having, well, then there's this weird disconnect. So I on the lender side, I would make sure that I'm speaking to my buyer's agents as detailed as possible around this conversation, so that we're all working with the same data and bringing a united conversation. Because I think that helps, because when Noelle does go to her buyer and have this conversation, sometimes buyers are distrusting of some of the information that we say. I mean, no one distrusts Noelle, but the rest of us sometimes suffer with that. And so all of a sudden now the lender saying the same thing.
I need you to sit there for another 2 minutes. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I will sit here for another 15 if at all possible, but then I might have to go. So I'll ask though before I do it, Randy. So the idea of having the data and using the data can be helpful as long as we're on the same page about it. That's my answer to you, Tammy, is be on the same side and reinforce the things that we're saying, so that buyers hear a third party now say, oh, okay, well, that's the same thing Noel said. Wow, okay, so maybe we need to reconsider this.
Okay, that's helpful. If anybody else has any suggestions, please let me know.
It's kind of the same conversation when this hasn't happened recently, but when I was called upon to sit and have conversations with sellers who weren't selling, right? I don't really say anything different than what you guys say. I'm just an unrelated kind of third party person out here that they don't know, that there's not a relationship with. And so sometimes me saying the same thing just underscores what you've already been communicating and validates it more because somebody else said the same thing. It's not anything more than that, right? What else?
I had one more question, sorry. And I'm sorry for not muting myself again.
No worries.
With everything we have going on right now with new construction and it being as limited as it is, but also as expensive as it is for a reason, obviously. Do you think we should be pulling that out of the metrics there on the search, a new construction, if it doesn't have any comparison to a new construction? Because I almost feel like it's skewing in certain situations, condos especially and whatnot, that number because of the demand as well as the way they play with the numbers in the listings. They just keep moving them around every week and then close, obviously.
Yeah, so great question. And my answer, it may not surprise you, is it depends. And so the reason it depends is I think it depends on what you're attempting to accomplish. I think if you're looking at a general market overview, new construction, just like foreclosures, they're a part of the market and they work themselves into averages. If you're looking at a smaller price segment and there's this one weird outlier that's kind of skewing things, what I used to do when I was having conversations around numbers with clients is I would run the numbers with and without, so that I wasn't making the decision about what to put in front of them. I would just simply say to them, so here are two sets of numbers. This one includes this crazy, ridiculous new construction, and this removes that data point from the mix. So it's really more apples to apples. However, I wanted you to have both sets of data to be able to compare and contrast. So I think it's an and, not an or in that scenario, and then just explain why it might be. But again, the bigger picture of things, back in the 2008 to 2010, 11, 12 period where short sales and foreclosures were running rampant, I can remember the conversations in this very, well, not in this very Zoom room because we weren't Zooming back then, but in this very room that I'm sitting in, and conversations around, well, but those distressed properties have to be removed. They're not really comps. Like, well, unfortunately, that's the message you need to help communicate to your sellers. Yeah, a distressed property sale right next door that is the same 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath colonial on an acre that your house is, it absolutely is a comp, and they serve to bring the numbers down. I'm sorry about that, but that's just real, right? And for many of us, we weren't communicating that to the sellers, and we were allowing the sellers to say, no, that doesn't count. No, it counts in the overall general picture, the big scheme of things. It counts. You don't necessarily expect to perhaps get the same quote unquote deal with an equity sale as you might a distressed property. So your number may not necessarily be the same as that one. However, from an averages perspective, oh, you leave them in and they affect the averages. What else? Questions, comments, concerns? Anything else you're struggling with buyers or sellers with numbers? Patricia.
Hey, Rick, I think the answer to this is yes, but if you wanted to compare this, narrow the focus even further into like a street, you could do it, right? You could choose a street.
Yeah, you absolutely could. Yeah, you can get as tiny as quantum as you feel you need to. My warning there. Hold on a second. Oh man, I apologize. I have this tickle in my throat that is simply not funny anymore. Um, the, the issue with getting really, really tiny in terms of the data you're pulling is that anomalies kind of rule the day then, right? So if you're only looking at a street and somebody sold crazy high or crazy low, and there's not enough other data to kind of balance that out,
Yeah.
the data itself maybe isn't quite as relevant. Sometimes it may be, and yet oftentimes there's just not enough data points to create a bigger picture, right? So just be careful as you get smaller and smaller, and that includes going from town to price point. As you get smaller, there's just less data, so anomalies can sometimes wreak havoc with the actual numbers. That's where you have to step in and broaden things out a little bit. Maybe you do a little further time period back. Maybe you do not just that street, but the whole neighborhood to get more data so that you have enough points to make a point.
Yeah,
Oftentimes on a street, there's one or two.
right.
That's not really necessarily enough to remember. Appraisers don't come back and say, are there comparables on the same street? They typically look for something as close as possible, and then if they can't find it, go out from there, but
Yeah.
not necessarily the same street.
That makes sense, because I was thinking, like, if you have some of these comparisons where you have, like, the beach street, the waterfront street versus, the street by the train station, which is much, much less expensive, that it could conceivably be helpful for them to see, though, to your point, maybe that there's not enough data for it to be meaningful, right? But to see, like, what their street or their area, and then probably also see, right, like the whole neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah. And and so what you're talking about, Patricia, is it's what I call them discounts, right? So there are certain things that create discounts, and that's, being by the highway, or being by the railroad tracks, or the high tension wires, or the up driveway, the down driveway, the double yellow line road, right? All those kinds of things that create discounts off of market value. I'm always fascinated when sellers, when buyers purchase one of those discountable properties and they buy it for 5% less than everybody else's property was selling for that didn't have the same discount, and then they want to sell it and they forget that they've got a 5% discount and they want to erase the discount. No, the discount's still there, right? So now when you're a seller, regardless, you can expect that same discount or so to show up in a property that you're looking to sell. The hot market sometimes erases some of that, but not all of it.
Yeah, I know someone who actually just did that with one, well, not too long ago, with the high tension wires. Exactly. And that was the only way they were actually able to even afford to buy in that town. So it worked in their favor. But I'm betting that you're right, that they might have some amnesia when it comes time to sell.
Yes, I call that selective amnesia. It happens all the time. Lloydie, what else?
Yes, one of those set of values that you pulled, it had the list price to sale price ratio. It was 44%. So that's one of those deep discounts. But that was not my question. My question is, if you are to organize this data by price range, what range would you use? Because every time I use a range, I think that's not the most appropriate range. So
yeah, that's a tough question to answer because it really depends on the town or the city. For example, in a city like Stamford, to me nowadays, if you're talking about single family properties, you're probably looking at a price range of under 450 or under 500, right? As a price range, because you're not buying single family housing in the 2s or 3s much anymore, right? So it's really anything under 5, and then maybe 5 to 750, 750 to $1 million, $1 million to $1.5 million, $1.5 million to $2 million. If you're in a town like I don't know, someplace further north, right? If you're in New Fairfield, well, those numbers don't work because there are price ranges between anything less than maybe 300, and then 300 to 450, 450 to 6 to 8, 8 to $1 million, right? So it depends, and then of course you have Westport or Greenwich, where anything that's less than $1 million is almost always its own category, and then you just jump up from there. So you have to kind of take the municipality you're talking about and see where the highs and the lows are. and break it down from there. There's not one answer to that.
Thank you.
What else? Anything else? Going once? Going twice? All righty. So I hope this was helpful to you. What I intended to do was kind of give you just another way to have conversations with your clients to help them understand what's going on in the market. One of the things to remember is this: just because we had that conversation 10 days ago for it's Tuesday, so maybe it was 2 weeks ago, right? For win the freaking deal. We're 2 weeks later, so we have to look at the numbers all over again. And as you get settled into some of these new strategies and new conversations, you've got to continue to stay on top of what's going on, so that 2 weeks from today, which is now a month from that win the freaking deal session, the numbers may be different. You're going to hear me talk tomorrow at 9 o'clock a little bit about getting prepared for the eventual recession that's coming. I was on with Gary on Friday, and we talked a whole lot about, the signs. What is it looking like? Where are we headed? You do recognize that there's only one place for us to go from where we are, right? It's not up. And so what does that start to look like? How are we preparing for that? I think I said to you guys the other day that when I was reading the Shift book in our book club, right at the end of Shift, which was written back in 2009, he talked about the different markets, right? A buyer's market. Here, the whole concept is a buyer's market. Here we go. Downward shifts are more difficult on the front end. Upward shifts become more difficult on the back end, right? So the upward shift that we just experienced, we're now in that position of it becoming more difficult on the back end. A sustained seller's market finishes with crazy high competition. I don't know about the rest of you, but that seems to be what we're experiencing, right? We had an upward shift that's now getting more difficult on the back end because it's finishing with extremely high, crazy competition. And then the only thing that changes that is that at some point, buyers get fed up with that world and they start offering less or start not offering. So what you can expect to happen in the next, and again, when this is going to show up, that is anybody's guess, right? But in the next 6 to 12 months, you'll put a listing on and you'll be waiting around for your 12 offers and you'll get 2. And the sellers will say, well, I don't understand. Where are the other 10? Welcome to the shift, right? That's what's going to start happening. And so you have to just start getting getting ready for it, right? And moving in the direction. Enjoy it while you still have it. And you know my feeling from last week about buyers who are in the market who are unwilling or unable to play at the level they need to play, right? They're making this worse by extending the period of time that sellers feel like they're getting a bazillion offers. If instead of those 12 or 15 offers that you had, because 5 or 6 or 8 of them were at or below list price, what if those people just stayed home? Well, then the sellers are only choosing from the 5 or 6 that are left, and their head is not as big because they didn't really get 12 or 15 offers. They got 5. But because those buyers keep throwing their hat in the ring just in case, they're actually filling the seller's head with, this is going to go on forever, and I can take my pick of all these different offers. It's just prolonging the inevitable. So at some point, something will give, and that will start to all shift. Randy, and then Lydia, and then we're out.
I talked to the cook's office yesterday because of the buyer's remorse stuff that I've been having trouble with. And she kind of just gave me a little insight that she's seeing a little bit of a shift on the buyer demand side. They're offering what is needed to win the deal. And she's seeing more and more of this so-called inspection backouts, which is truly buyer's remorse. And they're coming up with some sort of inspection thing because they're just demanding and walking away because they're like, we're not going to take this anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the cooks, you mean the attorneys, right? That's who that is.
Correct. The
Okay.
attorneys. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
They're seeing a lot.
At some point, that Twisted Sister song from the mid '80s, "We're Not Going to Take It," right, is going to start kind of blaring in their heads. And, but and until then, your challenge is working through buyers starting to get to that point, sellers not really wanting it to end, and continuing to try and fuse the two together, right? Helping buyers understand that today the sellers are still in control, and so if they want to win, they and yet as more and more of them decide, no, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to do that, things will eventually start to change. The trouble is that it takes 6 to 12 months for that changeover to really start to take effect, and then probably another 12 months before the sellers actually turn around and say, oh, it really isn't the same, right? I remember sellers in 2010 and even early 11 still saying things like, well, they keep talking about this whole shifted market. Are you kidding? Right. We lost 20% of value. We fell off a cliff, right? But they didn't want to look backwards and see that, because they were excited from what was happening in 2004, 5, and 6. Lydia, bring us home.
So can I ask you, what would you say the first signs of a shift are? Would you say it's days on market that we start noticing that's increasing, and we think that?
Yeah, I think it's an amalgamation of a lot of things. I think days on market starts to increase. However, I think before you see days on market start to increase, you're going to see numbers of offers start to decrease. Right? Properties may still sell in a weekend. However, they'll sell with 3 or 4 offers, not 25. Right? They'll sell with 2 offers, not 12. They'll start selling at asking price. My goodness, remember those days? And then the days on market might start to increase, because sellers may say, well, we're going to keep the house on the market a little longer to see if we can get an extra couple of offers. Right, so sellers may actually drive the days on market, not buyers. I guess it's always a combination of the two, right? But I think it is days on market. I think it's number of offers that you start to see. Somebody mentioned interest rates in the chat, right? That will continue to have an effect on the market. But I think it's all of those things that start to show up, that start to point us in a direction of, let's just get ready.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure thing. All right, Lloydie, last question.
Last question. Do you know where I can find those stats that Gary Keller shared at Family Reunion? It's not in that website. That I can't find it there. So I was wondering if it's someplace else.
Do you mean the vision speech, the charts and graphs from the vision speech?
Yes.
They're typically on KW Connect. Let me see if I can find them for you real quick. So typically, if you go to kwconnect.com and log in.
Lloydie, we had to search the vision speech, but with slides attached, and it showed up.
On KW Connect, Julie?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. So
okay.
That's where they should be.
Okay, thank you.
If you can't find it, I have it and I can forward it to you.
Yeah, and so for the rest of you who don't know where that is, it's just kwconnect.com. Or if you log into your version of MyKW at mykw.kw.com and click on education at the top, it'll bring you to KW Connect. So and then once you're there's a little search magnifying glass. Just type in vision speech, and that should pop up. Yep, it does. Vision speech, popular resources, 2022 vision speech slides. Hold on, I'll show you what it looks like. '22 vision speech slides. That's what you're looking for. All righty. All right, guys, it is 2:05. I hope this was helpful to you. If I can be of any further assistance with these numbers, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to help in whatever way I can. Have a spectacular afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Do join us tomorrow morning at 9, because we are going to talk a little bit about some of what we touched on today and some of our prep work for what is to come. So we'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock. Have a
Hey,
great one.
Rick, we
Yeah.
have Bolt tomorrow.
Oh, you're 100% right. I was supposed to cancel my 9 o'clock. So thank you. So don't come at 9 o'clock, because I will not be there.
What time does Bolt start, by the way?
Bold starts at
9.
9. Be there as if it starts at 8:30.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So don't come tomorrow on the 9 o'clock call. For those of you who are registered for Bold, do show up in the Stanford Market Center for Bold. Be there before 8:30. We'll have bagels and coffee, as well as those of you who reserved a seat for First Step. I'm going to be sending out confirmations of those reservations. The whole thing is sold out. So if you didn't reserve a seat or register for full Bold, unfortunately, we're looking at next time for you on that. However, Thursday morning we'll plug back in, and maybe Steve will have me as a guest, and I'll talk about the market a little bit.
Well, there will be no 9 a.m.
No 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'm going to send out an email on that shortly. I was supposed to do it this morning and forgot. So thank you for that reminder. All right, guys. Have a great day.
Nice afternoon.
Thank you.